Welcome to today's Explainer. We're tracking an incredibly intense multinational water dispute that's playing out right now across three nuclear-adjacent nations. Today, we're diving into how rivers, systems that fundamentally do not care at all about human borders, are literally being weaponized to reshape modern geopolitics.
So it's a fascinating question, right? What actually happens when the ultimate geopolitical weapon isn't a missile or a drone, but just simple altitude? Picture a massive geographic ladder. The countries sitting at the top of this ladder hold absolute physical leverage over everyone below them. Why? Because water flows down, and with it flows an enormous amount of power. Here is our playing field. Right at the top, we've got China, holding the crucial headwaters. In the middle sits India, drinking from China's rivers while simultaneously controlling the flow down into Pakistan. And at the very bottom, Pakistan and Bangladesh holding almost zero leverage in this setup. As you'll see, India is actually fighting two water wars simultaneously here, one as the aggressor looking down the ladder, and one as the extremely vulnerable party looking up.
Let's start on that middle rung with India and Pakistan. Now, for 65 years, the Indus Waters Treaty was, frankly, incredibly resilient. It was brokered way back in 1960, and it survived multiple outright wars completely intact. But then, in April 2025, that amazing unbroken streak was suddenly shattered following a terror attack in Kashmir. Following that tragedy, India did something totally unprecedented. They unilaterally froze the treaty, declaring it suspended in abeyance. What followed was a brief but incredibly intense escalation, actually including the first ever drone battle between these two nuclear powers. By May, a ceasefire managed to hold, but the water negotiations completely deadlocked. The dispute had officially outgrown the very crisis that triggered it. Now, usually when we hear the phrase water war, we tend to picture someone just turning off a giant faucet, right? But look at the engineering reality here. India's reservoir capacity on these western rivers is just a tiny, tiny fraction compared to the river's massive annual flow. I mean, they are physically incapable of just blocking the river off today. So that begs the question, how do you weaponize water without a massive dam? Well, you do it logistically, and honestly, it's much more insidious. Step 1, India simply stopped sharing flood data. Step 2, they began flushing their reservoirs without any warning. And by doing this, they unexpectedly dropped the river flow during Pakistan's absolutely critical spring sowing season. So it isn't a physical blockade, it's weaponization through pure unpredictability. But a much larger, more permanent threat is quietly being built for the future. India is reviving dormant barrages and widening canals. Most significantly, a 2026 approval actually allows them to physically reroute enormous amounts of Chenab water away from Pakistan. Individually, maybe these projects dance around legal gray areas, but combined, they pave the way for India to physically choke off the water supply within the next decade. For Pakistan, this isn't just some political spat. It is an absolute existential threat. Over 90% of their irrigated farmland lies directly inside this basin. We're talking about a system that supports a quarter of their entire economy. Pakistan considers any real diversion an act of war, a stance, by the way, that was validated by international arbitration, which India subsequently rejected. Okay, now I want you to mentally climb one rung higher on our geographic ladder. We need to turn this perspective entirely around, because the very same government weaponizing water against Pakistan is currently facing the exact same terror from above. They are on the receiving end of the identical playbook, but this time administered by China. 60 gigawatts. Just let that number sink in for a second. Up at the Great Bend in Tibet, where the river abruptly drops 2,000 meters, China is building the largest hydropower project on Earth. This thing will triple the capacity of their already massive Three Gorges Dam. Construction is well underway, literally boring straight through the mountain at an estimated cost of $170 billion. As you can imagine, the sheer panic in downstream India is palpable. The chief minister of Arunachal Pradesh has literally called this Chinese megaproject a water bomb. Local leaders are living in absolute fear that a sudden Chinese water release, whether intentional or completely accidental, could physically wipe out the entire Siang Valley. China insists the dam is safe, but downstream, trust is completely non-existent. Sit with this geopolitical contrast for just a second. With Pakistan, India actually has a robust legal infrastructure, a 65-year treaty, arbitration courts, neutral experts. Tools it's currently choosing to suspend. But with China, the country India fears the most, there are absolutely zero water-sharing treaties. None. There is literally no legal recourse whatsoever.
Which brings us to the information blackout. Now, to be fair to the facts, hydrologists do note that the Chinese dam is technically run-of-river, meaning it's not a massive storage reservoir. But honestly, that doesn't matter much when you're flying completely blind. Beijing has cut off all data sharing, they haven't disclosed exact dam locations or reservoir sizes, leaving India totally in the dark, with zero real-time flood warnings. This creates a rather tragic irony. To protect itself from China, India decided to build a massive counterdam on the Siang River, just to absorb those potential sudden water releases. But local indigenous communities protested, refusing cash payouts and even burning bridges to block access. So you have the same government that's protesting China's coercive aggression now using armed police against its own tribal citizens to force through survey work. And we definitely cannot forget the absolute bottom of this entire system, Bangladesh. They're by far the most exposed and least powerful party in all of this. They desperately need the river sediment that rebuilds their sinking delta every single year. Yet, they sit powerless. They formally request details from Beijing that they never actually receive, just watching as their literal geographic foundation is trapped behind massive dams they have absolutely no say over. By July 2026, the entire situation had devolved into a complete, high-stakes deadlock across all three nuclear-adjacent powers. India's water minister is vowing not a single drop for Pakistan, while simultaneously approving huge defense spending. Pakistan is openly warning of armed conflict. And China? They simply refuse to even schedule a single meeting to share data. So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. The water hasn't actually stopped flowing yet, anywhere on this ladder. But the trust, the data sharing, and that 65-year assumption of stability, that has completely dried up. When silence itself becomes the weapon, what happens to the billions of people living at the bottom of the ladder? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. This is absolutely a geopolitical reality we all need to keep our eyes on.